None of my family members attended my retirement party. They all gave excuses, but after the party, I saw a picture of them on social media having a party at my beach house. I smiled and made one call, and they won't stop calling me. What happened was unimaginable. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Jacob Ramsey from New York. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I spent 4 decades inside a tower, watching planes crisscross the sky like slow dancing fireflies, guiding strangers through invisible highways with my voice and a screen. My name's Raymond Dalton, and I retired last Saturday. I'd worked every holiday, every shift no one else wanted. I missed my son's 10th birthday because some kid in training botched a handoff, and I had to step in. I missed my niece's wedding because I was covering for my younger brother, who had a migraine. For 40 years, I showed up for work and, more painfully, for family. So when it came time to say goodbye to the job that gave me ulcers and a solid pension, I planned a small, meaningful gathering at a rented hall. Nothing flashy. Just a dinner, some music, a little speech. Mostly, I wanted to look around the room and see the faces of the people I'd spent my life taking care of. That was all. I didn't need balloons or a slideshow. I just wanted my people there. The RSVP list had looked promising 2 weeks out. My younger brother, Jerome, said he wouldn't miss it for the world. My son, Darren, texted, "Proud of you, Pop. I'll be there." Even my ex-wife, Margot, said she'd stop by. Briefly, she clarified, but still. The night before the event, I stood at the mirror, shaving my graying beard a little closer than usual, rehearsing the speech I planned to give. I talked about legacy, about working with integrity, about how lucky I was to have a family that always had my back. I almost choked up rehearsing the last line. Something corny about how control towers were meant for people who could keep calm in chaos. But nothing had prepared me for the chaos of loving people who didn't always love you back. I ended up cutting that line before the actual speech. I didn't want to make it heavy. I didn't want to sound bitter. The first call came at 3 p.m., 3 hours before the party. It was Jerome. "Ray, man, I'm so sorry. Mia's got this dance recital we forgot about. We can't skip it. But hey, let's do lunch next week, okay?" I said, "Yeah, no problem," and felt a weird hollowness in my gut. He'd never mentioned a recital. Then came a text from Darren. "Hey, Pop, work emergency. I'll make it up to you, I swear." I didn't reply. Then my niece Brianna called, all syrupy guilt. "Uncle Ray, don't hate me. Jason surprised me with a trip up the coast." I didn't think it would overlap. My hand clenched around the phone. "It's fine," I said, and hung up before she could say more. By 6 o'clock, the only family at my party were distant cousins I barely spoke to and 2 retired co-workers who had shown up mostly for the free shrimp cocktail. I gave my speech anyway. People clapped. I smiled. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because the version of me that used to get teary over family no-shows had been dead a long time. This was just the final funeral. After everyone left, I sat alone at the corner table, loosening my tie and eating one of those sad little chocolate-covered strawberries meant for decoration. The cleanup crew swept around me quietly. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just tired. There was a kind of fatigue that came from holding up too much for too long. It wasn't the missed party that stung, it was the pattern. The dozens of events I'd funded, supported, and been forgotten in. I thought about how many vacations Jerome had taken with money I'd loaned him. How often Brianna had used my place at the beach like it was a cheap Airbnb. How Darren, my only child, once called me old-fashioned for expecting a thank you after I'd paid off his credit card debt. I thought about all of it as I sat in that cold, quiet room, picking frosting off a cupcake no one ate. And still, a part of me defended them. Maybe they really were busy. Maybe I was expecting too much. Maybe. I drove home in silence, radio off, the buzz of fluorescent lights still humming in my ears. My house felt colder than usual, like it knew what had happened. I took off my shoes at the door, something Margot used to nag me about, and poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon. I sat down in the recliner I'd bought for my retirement, hadn't even broken it in yet, and opened my phone. I hadn't checked it since the last text. I was avoiding the guilt-ridden apologies or maybe the total silence. Either way, I was prepared for disappointment. What I wasn't prepared for was a photo. A single, glossy, high-contrast photo sitting at the top of my feed, posted by Brianna. Her, Darren, Jerome, and even Margot. All of them, holding drinks, laughing under the string lights I'd hung myself last summer at my beach house. The caption read, "Nothing like family and ocean air." My chest tightened. I stared at the picture for a long time, not angry, not even surprised. Just confirming. Like reading a diagnosis you already suspected. I had planned for disappointment, but not for that level of audacity. Not only had they skipped my farewell, but they had gathered, celebrated, on my dime, in my space, pretending I didn't exist. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I smiled. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it came from a place deeper than anger. A place called clarity. That moment. Right there in the quiet, with bourbon still swirling in the glass and the house humming around me, something in me shifted. I picked up the phone, not to call any of them, but to reach out to my property manager, Tasha. "Hey," I said, "do me a favor. Check on the beach house. I think we've got some squatters." She laughed. "Want me to send security?" I paused. "Yeah, and shut off their access cards. They'll get the message." I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was furious or tormented, but because I was thinking. There's a difference between rage and recognition. Rage makes you want to lash out, scream, break things. Recognition just settles in your bones like cold air, seeps into the spaces between your thoughts, and makes everything feel quieter. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, the bourbon long gone, and the ice melted beside me. The photo from Brianna's feed was still burned into my vision. Jerome's arm around Darren like they'd never had a falling out. Margot holding a glass of rose, her head tilted back mid-laugh, and Brianna's caption mocking me in its cheerfulness. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had excluded me. And worse, they'd done it at the one place I had built for all of us to share. I bought that beach house 12 years ago with the intention of making it our family's safe place. Every wall painted by hand, every tile picked out one Saturday at Home Depot while Darren trailed behind me complaining. I pictured them now, barefoot on my floors, tracking in sand, leaving the refrigerator open too long, and laughing in the very space I had built so they could feel close to me. By morning, my decision was fully formed, not emotional, but calculated. I didn't want an apology. I didn't want excuses. I didn't want to hear Jerome's famous, "You're being dramatic, man," or Darren's deflection into sarcasm, or Brianna's sugar-coated manipulation. I wanted silence, permanence, closure. So I picked up my phone and called Tasha again. "Hey," I said calmly, "they're still there, right?" She hesitated. "Yes, Mr. Dalton. They're all still checked in." I closed my eyes. "All right, here's what I need. I want their access to the gate revoked. Any credit cards they're using under my name, freeze them. And send security to the property. Let them know they're trespassing now." Tasha paused. "Sir, you sure you want to?" I cut her off gently. "Just do it. Please." There was no tremble in my voice, no heat. I'd slipped into a clarity I hadn't felt in years. "Also," I added, "cancel any return flights I paid for. If they need to get home, they'll have to figure it out like grown-ups." After hanging up, I typed out one final message and sent it to the family group chat. "You are on your own. Don't call me again." That was it. No punctuation at the end. Just a sentence. Plain, clean, sharp. I turned my phone on silent, dropped it face down on the kitchen table, and went outside to sit on the back porch. It was early enough that the world hadn't started moving yet. Just birds, the occasional dog barking, and the wind brushing against the pine trees. I felt something lifting, like a pressure that had been pushing down on my ribs for years. All I'd ever wanted was to feel like I belonged in my own family. I paid for their flights, bought their groceries when times were tight, loaned money without ever asking for it back. Hell, I let Jerome live in my guest house for 7 months while he figured things out. But somehow, they always made me feel like the fringe relative, the dependable one, the bank, the background character. The first call came in at 9:04 a.m. Jerome. I watched the screen light up, but didn't touch it. Then Darren. Then Brianna. Then a string of unknown numbers, probably people using someone else's phone since I'd shut off the data plans I had been paying for. The voicemails rolled in next. Tasha texted me. Security arrived. They're not happy. Want to know what to do with their stuff. I responded. Leave it on the porch. Change the locks after they leave. They can't stay there. She replied with a thumbs up and a line I didn't expect. Good for you, Mr. Dalton. That text made me sit back a little. It wasn't much, but it was the first time someone acknowledged that maybe, this wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was necessary. I'd spent years absorbing small slights, family jokes at my expense, moments where I was forgotten or used. And when I finally said, enough, I was expected to do it gently. I wasn't playing that role anymore. Around noon, I turned my phone back on and scrolled through the voicemails, not to listen to all of them, but just to glance at the transcripts. Jerome, Ray, this is insane. You're overreacting. We didn't mean to. Deleted. Brianna, Uncle Ray, we're stranded. I don't have my wallet. Jason can't get an Uber. What are we supposed to do? Deleted. Darren, really? You're just going to cut off your own son. That one I saved. Not because I believed it would change anything, but because there was something about hearing your grown child call you out for finally protecting yourself that needed to be remembered. I had given Darren everything I could. Tuition, rent for 2 years. I even bought his first car. And when I asked him to show up for me, just once, he threw a party in my absence and toasted his real ones. Later that afternoon, I drove to the lake and set up a fishing line. I hadn't done that in a year. I used to fish every Sunday before the family drama started to escalate. Something about sitting by the water with a pole and silence felt like church to me. I didn't catch anything that day. I didn't need to. I just watched the way the ripples danced across the surface and thought, this is what peace feels like. I wondered how long it would take them to realize I wasn't bluffing. Probably a few more voicemails, a few guilt-laden texts, maybe even a visit. But it didn't matter. They were out of my house. Out of my accounts. Out of my control. They could twist it however they wanted. Make me the villain at Sunday dinner. Tell extended relatives I'd lost my mind. Let them. I'd finally stepped off the emotional treadmill they kept me running on, and my legs were still catching their balance. I ended the day back on my porch, watching the sun drop behind the trees. I poured a single drink, not out of sadness, but as a toast. Not to my retirement. Not to them. But to clarity. To finally seeing things as they were, not as I wanted them to be. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't celebrating. I was just still. And for the first time in years, still felt good. Still felt like mine. The next morning, I woke up to chaos, but not mine. My chaos had already been delivered, sealed, and sent out in one short, final text. Theirs, on the other hand, had just begun. When I finally checked my phone, after breakfast, after a slow cup of coffee, after feeding the birds out back, there were 26 missed calls, 11 voicemails, and a string of text messages that ranged from manipulative to borderline feral. I sat at the table and scrolled through them like a man skimming the morning paper. Jerome led with his usual swagger. Real mature, Ray. You trying to prove something? Darren followed with something colder. You're pathetic. This is why Mom left. I paused on that one. Not because it hurt, but because it was revealing. That was the venom he carried inside him. He didn't even try to hide it. Just launched it at me like a rock through glass, hoping it would stick. But it didn't. That boy didn't know me anymore. Maybe he never did. There were other texts, too. Brianna's messages were the most frantic. Uncle Ray, please. We're stuck out here. No one has cash. Our phones are gonna die. We can't even call an Uber. Another one said, why would you do this? What did we ever do to you? I laughed at that, a bitter chuckle that felt too sharp to be funny. What did they do to me? That was the question, wasn't it? Not in a single, dramatic moment, but in 1,000 little ways. They drained me slowly, like a slow leak under the floorboards. Always asking, never giving, always expecting, never thanking. They didn't think they were doing anything to me because they'd never seen me as a person who could be hurt. I was the uncle, the dad, the big brother. A resource, a constant, a wallet, a roof. They mistook my silence for peace. They mistook my generosity for duty. And now they were stunned to find out I had limits. Around 10, Tasha called. They're out, she said simply. Security gave them 30 minutes to gather their stuff. They argued. Darren tried to say it was his dad's house, so I had to show him the deed. I smiled, not with pleasure, but with relief. Did they leave anything behind? I asked. Just a mess. Beer cans in the sand. Towels everywhere. Brianna left a flat iron plugged in. Could have burned the whole place down. I rubbed my temple. Have someone clean it up. Bill me for it. And change the locks. She hesitated, then added, Ray, you did the right thing. That made me pause. You've seen this before? I asked. She laughed under her breath. Sir, I manage properties for rich families. I've seen every version of this. Entitled kids. Mooching relatives. Guilt-tripping exes. Most folks just keep the peace. But I'll tell you, this is the first time I've seen someone actually pull the plug. It's rare. I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a moment. It was rare. Because it was hard. Because it felt unnatural. Because no one wants to be the one who cuts family loose. But sometimes the rope is already burned, and all you're holding is ash. By noon, the second wave of damage control had begun. My cousin Reggie texted me. Yo, what's going on? Darren says you kicked everybody out. Then a Facebook message from Aunt Louise. You could have handled this better, Ray. Family is family. That one irked me more than the others. It was that tired phrase, family is family, that kept people trapped in toxic patterns, forgiving things they had no business tolerating. I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I wrote a note in my journal, the one I rarely touched. Just a few lines. They chose not to come. They chose not to call. They chose not to care. Now I'm choosing myself. I didn't need anyone to validate that. I didn't need a tribunal of aunties and cousins to weigh in. I had lived in this skin for 62 years. I had paid the bills, weathered the storms, and buried both my parents while everyone else conveniently disappeared. I had earned the right to draw a line in the sand, and I had finally drawn it, right across the front porch of my beach house. By that evening, the tone of the messages began to shift. The rage had burned off, replaced by desperation. Brianna again. Uncle Ray, please. We've been trying to find a motel. Everything's booked. I'm scared. Jerome tried something softer too. Let's just talk, man. Face to face. No yelling. But I knew that trick. He'd say something half apologetic, shift the blame to someone else, and by the end of the conversation, I'd be paying for his Uber back to the airport. I deleted the message. Darren sent one more. I hope you're happy. You ruined this family. That one made me pause. Not because I agreed, but because it told me something crucial. They weren't trying to understand what they did. They weren't reflecting. They were assigning blame. And I was the easiest target. The one who said no. In their minds, I hadn't responded to betrayal. I had caused a rupture. That's how twisted the dynamic had become. I was supposed to absorb it. Quietly. Endlessly. That was the role they had written for me. But I had set the script on fire. As the sun dipped low, I took another drive. This time out to the edge of town where a small diner sat nestled between two gas stations. It was the kind of place that hadn't updated its decor since 1973, but the coffee was strong and the food was honest. I needed a space where no one knew my last name. I ordered a BLT, black coffee, and sat in a corner booth by the window. The waitress, maybe late 50s, with tired eyes and a kind smile, dropped off my plate and said, "You look like a man who just said something he should have said 10 years ago." I blinked at her. Was it that obvious? She smirked. Only to people who've done it themselves. I smiled back. There was a strange comfort in that exchange, like being seen by a stranger who recognized the weight on your shoulders without needing the story behind it. Later that night, I sat in my recliner again, phone off, lights dimmed, TV muted. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was intentional. It was mine. The same family that had forgotten my retirement party was now losing their minds because I'd stopped funding their vacations and cleaning up their messes. There was irony in that. Sweet, poetic irony. I had been invisible when they toasted champagne under my string lights. But now that they were locked out, I was suddenly indispensable. That told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't family to them. I was a service. And I had just gone out of business. The real storm didn't start until 3 days later, when the group chat went quiet and the internet lit up. That's how it works now. When people can't get your attention directly, they try to wound you publicly. I didn't know anything was brewing until a former coworker, Carla, called me in the morning with a hesitant, "Hey, Ray, you okay?" I blinked, still halfway through my coffee, unsure what she meant. She cleared her throat and said, "I saw Margot's post. And Darren's. Thought maybe you were hacked or something, because they're saying, well, a lot." I didn't ask what. I just told her I was fine and thanked her for checking in. After I hung up, I opened my laptop, logged onto Facebook, and there it was, like stepping into a fire I hadn't started but would be blamed for all the same. Margot had posted a black and white photo of Darren as a boy, sitting on my shoulders at the beach, with the caption, "Sad to see how cold some people can become. Family doesn't mean anything to some folks unless they're in control." I stared at it for a long moment, not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. That was Margot's move, always subtle, always manipulative. She never attacked directly. She posed as the wounded party, the saint who suffered in silence, inviting people to fill in the blanks on her behalf. The comments came fast. "You don't deserve that, Margot. So sorry. Stay strong." Some people forget who was there for them when they had nothing. Each one twisted the knife a little more, not because they hurt me personally. These were strangers, but because I could see the story forming. They were painting me as the villain, the grudge holder, the ungrateful patriarch who turned on his own family the moment he got his gold watch and pension. And they were getting sympathy for it. That part stung. Not the lies, but the ease with which people accepted them. They didn't ask for details. They didn't ask what really happened. They just saw a crying woman and an old photo, and that was enough. Then came Darren's post. Shorter, harsher. Some people will take your loyalty, your childhood, and your love, and trade it for pride. I'll never understand how someone can abandon their own blood like garbage. But I guess that's who he always was. Cold. No photo. Just words on a black background, the kind you see when someone wants to perform grief. I didn't even flinch. He had always been theatrical, always drawn to drama like a moth to flame. What cut deeper wasn't what he said. It was the fact that I recognized that tone. That post wasn't for me. It was for his audience, his friends, his coworkers, maybe a girl he was trying to impress. It was a performance, not a plea. He didn't want reconciliation. He wanted applause. And judging by the comments, you deserve better. Cut toxic people out. You're breaking the cycle, bro. He got it. I didn't respond. I didn't comment or defend myself. I logged off, stood up, and went for a walk around the block. The fall air had that dry, biting chill that made your hands ache if you didn't stuff them in your pockets. Leaves were scattered along the sidewalk, crisp and loud underfoot. I passed Mrs. Green watering her mums and gave her a nod. She looked up and said, "Raymond, I read something odd this morning. You doing all right?" Her tone wasn't judgmental, just concerned, like someone watching a man walk through fire with no coat. I nodded and gave her the same answer I gave Carla. "I'm good." And I was. But there was a hollowness underneath it, a low, steady hum of grief I hadn't made space for yet. I didn't miss them exactly, but I missed the idea of them. The version of my family I used to see in my head, the one where they showed up, where they cared, where I wasn't just useful but loved. That evening, I got an unexpected knock at the door. It was Marvin, my old fishing buddy and neighbor from 2 streets over. He was carrying a six-pack and wearing that same beat-up windbreaker he always wore when he wanted to have a real talk. I let him in without a word, and we sat on the back porch while the sun dipped low behind the trees. "You've had a hell of a week," he said, cracking open a bottle and handing it to me. I nodded. "Looks like it." He didn't ask for details. Didn't pry. Just sat with me in the quiet for a while, drinking slowly, letting the stillness stretch. After a while, he spoke again. "I saw what they posted. And I just want to say, you're not crazy. And you're not wrong." I looked over at him, surprised by the directness. "You know my family?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not really. Just seen him in passing. But I've been alive long enough to know how this stuff goes. The moment you stop playing the role they put you in, they call you the villain. It's easier than admitting they took you for granted." Something in me unspooled at that. Not because he told me something I didn't know, but because someone said it. Out loud. Without judgment. Without pretense. He wasn't trying to fix me. He was just affirming what I had been too proud to admit. I wasn't just hurt. I was grieving. Grieving the fantasy I'd built in my head. The belief that one day they'd wake up and treat me the way I'd treated them. But Marvin was right. They liked the version of me that kept giving. The quiet, dependable Ray who bailed them out, who smiled through being forgotten, who loaned money and never asked for it back. The moment I flipped the script and demanded respect instead of tolerance, I became the bad guy. And I was finally starting to be okay with that. When Marvin left, I sat on the porch for another hour, staring out at the dark yard, listening to the insects hum in the grass. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I didn't answer. I wouldn't answer. That part of me, the one that jumped at every ring, hoping it might be an apology, was gone. Instead, I opened my journal again and wrote one sentence. Let them say what they need to say. I already know the truth. That truth wasn't pretty. It wasn't neat. But it was mine. And it was hard-earned. They showed up on a Thursday. No warning, no call, just the sound of tires on gravel and doors slamming shut. I was out back watering the hydrangeas when I heard the commotion. 3 voices at once. Brianna's high and shrill, Jerome's deep and defensive, and Darren's sharper, angrier than the others. I took my time walking around the house. I didn't rush. I wasn't afraid. I just wanted one last quiet moment before I stepped into the storm they had brought to my doorstep. When I rounded the corner, I found all 3 of them standing on the porch like they were staging a protest. Darren looked like he hadn't slept, eyes bloodshot, jaw tight. Jerome wore sunglasses, the kind people put on when they're hiding behind something. And Brianna? She was already crying. Or pretending to. Hard to tell. Ray. Jerome started, his tone already riding that thin line between calm and condescending. We need to talk. I didn't respond. I didn't invite them in. I simply leaned against the porch post and crossed my arms. Talk then, I said. You've already made the trip. Let's not waste it. Darren stepped forward like he was ready to square up. What the hell is wrong with you, he snapped. You humiliated us. Left us stranded like trash. That's not what family does. I looked at him. Really looked. And realized just how much he still saw himself as the wounded son instead of the grown man he'd become. No, I said slowly. Family doesn't throw a party at someone's house while lying to their face. Family doesn't skip the most important day of someone's life just to drink on their dime. And family sure as hell doesn't rewrite the story online to make themselves the victims. Brianna wiped her eyes, mascara streaking down her cheek. Uncle Ray, I swear, we weren't trying to hurt you. It just had happened. Jason surprised me with the idea, and everyone was already there. It wasn't planned like that. I raised an eyebrow. You posted a photo with a caption about the real ones. You don't write something like that unless you mean something by it. Don't insult me by pretending it was innocent. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Just a soft exhale. Defeated. She knew I had her. She just didn't know how to admit it. Jerome finally took off his sunglasses and ran a hand down his face. Ray, come on. We messed up. But you went nuclear, man. Kicked us out. Left us broke. You could have called. You could have talked to us first. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Like how y'all talked to me before skipping my retirement. Like how you coordinated that little beach getaway behind my back. I stepped forward, my voice firmer now. You want to talk about disrespect? Let's talk. I pointed at Darren. You think I forgot the time you cursed me out because I wouldn't co-sign another loan for you? After I already paid off your last one. I turned to Brianna. You used my house like a summer hotel. Never cleaned up, never said thank you. You left the lights on for 3 days straight once while I was out of town. My electric bill was through the roof. And finally, I locked eyes with Jerome. You stayed in my guest house rent-free for 7 months. I never asked for a dime. But the minute I needed help fixing the roof, you suddenly had back pain. I let that hang in the air. Heavy. Unforgiving. You all want to act like this came out of nowhere. Like I just snapped. But this has been a long time coming. I let it slide for years. I gave and gave until I didn't recognize myself anymore. And the one time, I drew a line. You act like I set the world on fire. For a second, no one said anything. Just the sound of wind rustling the trees, the creak of the porch wood beneath our feet. Then Darren spoke again, softer this time. You didn't even give us a chance to explain. I stared at him. What was there to explain? That my retirement wasn't worth your time? That a weekend of partying mattered more than the man who made sure you never went hungry? He looked down. And I knew, in that moment, he had no answer. Not a real one. Because the truth was, they hadn't thought about me at all. I wasn't in their minds when they clinked glasses and posed for pictures. I was just the house, the ride, the credit card, the safety net, not the man behind it. I'm done, I said finally. Done making excuses for people who don't show up. Done being the one who keeps everything stitched together while everyone else tears at the seams. You don't get to waltz back in because things got uncomfortable. That door, I said, nodding to the front one behind them, doesn't swing both ways anymore. Brianna sobbed openly now, covering her mouth. Jerome looked like he might punch something, but held back. Darren. He turned and walked down the steps without another word. And that was that. No big blowout. No cathartic group hug. Just silence. And truth. And the sound of shoes crunching on gravel as they left. I didn't watch them drive away. I went inside, closed the door, and sat down in the living room. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. I expected to feel hollow, maybe even guilty. But I didn't. I felt clean. Like I'd washed off years of grime in one hard rinse. I poured myself a drink. Not in celebration, but in acknowledgement. I had survived something. Something invisible. Something constant. And I had made it out with my dignity intact. That mattered more than any fake apology or secondhand hug ever could. A week passed. Then another. The house grew quieter than usual, but it wasn't the kind of silence that gnaws at your nerves. It was the kind that settles into your bones like warm sunlight through a window. For the first time in years, I wasn't anticipating someone's call, or worrying about who might be upset with me, or bracing for some financial emergency I'd be guilt into solving. I slept better. I ate slower. I moved through my days with a strange, unfamiliar lightness. I wasn't expecting that part. I'd assumed the fallout would haunt me, that the ghost of obligation would come knocking late at night. But instead, there was only stillness. I realized how much noise I had tolerated. Not just the literal noise of calls and visits, but the emotional clutter of being responsible for everyone's comfort but my own. The difference now wasn't absence. It was peace. I returned to the beach house the following weekend. Tasha had finished the lock changes, and the cleaners had done their job. But there was still residue. Empty bottles behind the deck chairs, scuff marks on the hardwood, sunscreen stains on the lounge cushions. I walked through the room slowly, not angry, just observant. Each little mess told a story. A story about people who had come and gone without care, who had taken and used without pause. I didn't feel rage. I didn't want revenge. But I felt clarity. I took down the family photos in the hallway, frames I had carefully hung over the years, thinking they represented something whole. I boxed them up and slid them into the closet. I didn't throw them out. I wasn't erasing the past. But I didn't want it displayed like a lie either. That house was going to be mine again. Not a monument to relationships that no longer existed, but a space for restoration. For truth. For me. I spent the next day repainting the porch railing, something I'd been putting off for months. As I brushed on the fresh coat of white, I thought about how much of my life had been lived in reaction to other people. I had reacted to Darren's needs, to Jerome's excuses, to Brianna's whims. I had rearranged my life to accommodate theirs, and they had moved through mine like tourists. Entitled, distracted, never planning to stay. Now I was making choices that had nothing to do with them. The paint was for me. The new locks were for me. The silence wasn't lonely, it was protective. A boundary made visible. I didn't know how long it would last, or if they'd ever try again, but I knew one thing with certainty. If they returned, it would not be to the same man they left behind. Then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Not a text, not a DM. A real, handwritten letter. The handwriting was careful, almost hesitant. The return address was from Brianna. I stood in the kitchen, envelope in hand, debating whether to open it. My instinct said toss it, but curiosity tugged harder. So I sliced it open and unfolded the page. Her words were short, honest, not polished. Uncle Ray, I'm sorry. Not just for the beach house. For all of it. I've been selfish. I see that now. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it. I miss you. There was no manipulation in the tone. No ask. No defense. Just ownership. I stood there for a long time, holding the paper, feeling a strange flicker of emotion that wasn't sadness. It wasn't forgiveness either. It was recognition. A small moment of truth in a sea of noise. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw the letter away either. I folded it gently and tucked it into the drawer by the fridge. Maybe that was something. The rest of them never reached out again. Or if they did, I never saw it. I changed my number. Left Facebook. Let the noise die down on its own. Whatever story they told about me would live its short life online, recycled by people who barely knew me. And I didn't care. I had lived too long in the shadow of other people's narratives. This story, my story, was mine to hold. In the weeks that followed, I filled my time with quiet routines. Fishing again, fixing small things around the house, sitting in the morning sun with my journal, not writing anything profound, just little thoughts. Observations. One morning I wrote, "They don't miss me. They miss what I gave them. And I don't miss them. I miss who I thought they were." That was the cleanest way I could put it. Not bitter, just true. Sometimes, people would ask how my retirement was going. I'd smile, tell them it was peaceful, and leave it at that. Because it was. Peaceful. And earned. I didn't need to rehash the family drama. That wasn't my identity. It was just the last chapter of a long, uneven book I finally closed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was resolved. I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before, and the fallout had proven exactly why I needed to. They hadn't come back to apologize. They came back because they lost access to the house, the money, the man who never said no. And that was all I needed to know. One evening, I sat on the beach with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the tide roll in and out like breathing. The wind was cool, but not sharp. The kind that made you feel awake, not punished. I thought about my father. How he used to say, "You teach people how to treat you." I hadn't understood it when I was younger. I thought if you loved people hard enough, they'd figure it out. But love without boundaries is just sacrifice in disguise. I had taught them the wrong lesson for years. And now, finally, I was rewriting that script. Not for them. For me. If you've ever had to cut ties with family to protect your peace, I hope this story reminded you that you're not alone and you're not wrong. Sometimes, peace comes at the price of being misunderstood. But that peace? It's priceless. If this story resonated with you, go ahead and share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, betrayal, and healing. And if you've ever had to walk away to find yourself again, drop your story in the comments. I'm listening. See you soon in the next story.